Hey, it's Jermaine Edwards, your customer growth guide. If you're new, welcome. If you're old, welcome back to the fold. We're continuing our customer mastery series and looking at the 4 levels of communication. This is specifically intended for customer leaders who have teams, but equally, if you're a leader of a customer, you can use this specific methodology or way of thinking about communication to enhance what you do. This is video number 1 of 3, so let's get started. So let's talk about extrinsic communication. Now, extrinsic communication really appeals to the idea that communication at its first level within business tends to be much more directed to the outward things in which we do. And they fall into 2 different categories. The first is expectation. So naturally, as a leader of teams or a person leading your customer, you're leading from a place of expectation because as somebody working in partnership, you want to be clear on who's doing what, how you work together, and those things that matter most, to focusing on the areas, where you want to get the best results. And so expectation is a first level of communication that we have that allows us to set those right criteria. We're looking at metrics. We're looking at how we measure things. We're looking at those weekly conversations that allow us to align better in thinking about how we deliver things together. We're looking at those things that hold people accountable. So the first 2 areas under expectation then is really all about feedback. If I could spell, that'd be helpful, wouldn't it? Feedback and measurement. I clearly need more space. So feedback and measurement. So we have expectation, what sits underneath expectation is feedback and measurement. So what do I mean by those 2 areas? Well, within expectation, we're always feeding back. It's always on a loop of us communicating these new identified or refined expectations, or at least supporting the things that we're doing already. And within the context of feedback, we're always measuring something specific. There are job descriptions that we have. There are specific key performance indicators that we're looking at, or key outcome focused areas. All that is around extrinsic communication, and that first level is expectation. The second level of extrinsic communication that we see most often here, this next one is around execution. Execution. So among expectations, or among those things around expectation, those things are just what we're asking you to do. This is how well you're doing it. It's the execution of those specific tasks. And so naturally, as leaders, we're always having these conversations around how well are we doing at these particular tasks? Are we actually completing these specific activities? How well are we completing these activities? You'll be asking those things with your customers. Your customers will be asking them of you. That's all extrinsic communication. It's about the outward things that we're actually doing. And there are 2 things that fall underneath execution that we should be aware of. The first is priority, and the other is strategy. So naturally, within execution, we cannot execute those things that we aren't clear about. So within execution communication, that second level, we're always looking to refine and get much clearer on what the number 1 priority is. What is that thing that moves us closer to the overall objective or outcome that if focused on with the right level of resource, with the right level of energy and effort, would move us closer to really achieving the thing that we all want together. And then we define the strategy. And if you haven't looked at strategy before, I'd suggest you actually have a look at my goals, outcomes, and strategies video as a reference point to thinking about how you can form and really shape strategy well in your business. But these are the 2 areas, 2 levels of extrinsic communication expectation and execution. As a business leader, it's really important that you have these communication channels and that we're clear on what we mean by these particular areas around expectations, around feedback and measurement, around execution, about priority and strategy. If you can apply these specific areas, you'll know you'll be much more successful with your team and successful as a customer leader or somebody leading your customers. You can download the actual workbook in the notes below, so you can really work through how you would do this with your own team or individually, how you do this with your customers. So this is video number 1, extrinsic communication. Video number 2, we're going to talk about intrinsic communication and the power we have to move people at an emotional level with our communication.